wherever you happen to be, let me share something with you. Here at First Baptist Church, we love God's Word. And we will never do a song that isn't scripturally sound. We love to sing God's Word. And we love to sing the principles of God's Word, the truths of God's Word. But let me share this. As believers, we can hear God's Word and we'll know it as truth. And we're glad of that. But when we believers sing God's Word, it literally cements it into our spirits. Even the simplest truths, that God loves the world so much that he gave his only Son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Oh, we love that truth as believers. We love hearing that truth. But if we sing that truth about God's love for us, it literally drives it deep into our hearts. So we're asking you, sing with us in everything that we do today.
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how he loves us, oh, how he loves us, how he loves us so. Drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like a passionate kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest, and I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Yes, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. We are His portion, and He is our prize, drawn to redemption by the grace in His eyes. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. So heaven meets earth like a passionate kiss, and my heart turns violently inside of my chest, and I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Yes, He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. He does love us. Isn't that such a peaceful thought? That He loves us. And we don't have to do a thing. He loved us before we were even thought about. He loved us so much that He gave His beloved so that we would not have to pay the price that we deserve. We're going to sing a song now that is probably one of my very favorites. And I've prayed this prayer so many times, God, that You would just cover me, that You would protect me, that You would protect my family, that You would protect another person. I remember when the tornado happened last Easter. It happened quickly at my house. And for 35 seconds, I prayed for covering because we didn't know if we were going to make it through that tornado or not. And as my house shook, and I wondered if it was just going to shake apart, God's hand just protected us. And while I expected a lot of damage, there was just a little bit of siding off. But that tornado just went right by our house. And it could have been so much worse, but His hand was over us and He protected us. So today, as we sing Still, think about those times that He's protected you, even when He hasn't asked you. And know that when you have anxiety, when you have worries, all you have to do is just be still in His love.
let's keep the momentum going here as we roll right into our time in the Word today. By the way, it is awesome to be able to share this experience with you. We're going to be back in our sermon series in 1 Samuel called King of My Heart. And by the way, if you've missed any of the previous editions, you go right to our website, fbcfo.org, and you can find them there under the Watch tab. It's like their own demand there for you. If you have your copy of God's Word, that's an awesome thing to have. Of course, we will have a lot of the scripture that will be imposed here for you on the screen as we get to 1 Samuel chapter 5. If you've been with us at all with previous editions of this series, you'll know that we're looking at a time period with the people of Israel when they were desperate for a king. This was in the time between the rise of Samuel leading up to Saul and ultimately the anointing of King David. During this time before Saul, there was no king. The people were desperate in this in-between time. They were desperate for a king, but we see that the king that they wanted, what they wanted for themselves, would never really address the problem of their hearts. And well, what is that problem that they experienced, and I believe we do as well? The very last verse of the book of Judges tells us what that is, Judges 21:25. It's the very last verse before 1 Samuel. And in that verse, we are told there was no king in Israel in those days, and everyone simply did what they thought was best in their own heart. Everyone just did what was right in their own eyes, and you can imagine the problem when no one is seeking God, when no one is looking to Him for guidance and wisdom, with each human being being the measure of their own wisdom and guidance and what's right and what's true and false, then everything becomes relative. And that is very similar to the culture that we live in today. You may have your truth whenever you're watching this, and someone else has theirs and I have mine. But if there's nothing higher above us, you can just imagine the problems that we get into when there is no higher truth. Well, the people were living that way, and we know that even if they didn't see the problem, God did. Our anchor verse for this series is in chapter 16, 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. When Samuel was going over to raise up the next king that would be King David, Samuel was there looking at all of David's siblings, and he had several brothers that were bigger, faster, stronger, and God says, don't look at their stature, don't look on their height or the physical stature, don't see them the way that man sees. God says that we see, basically, more often than not, we look at appearances, what's on the outside, but God goes deeper as to what's in our hearts. God sees the heart. That's what matters most to Him, and it has invited us to ask this big question for the series. Well, okay, if God knows, maybe He needs to help me know, but the ultimate question is, who is the king of your heart? Is it you? Is it a job? Is it a circumstance? Is it another person? Is it God Himself? So many of us would answer that question that way, but is that really true? We're going to continue to answer that question right here in 1 Samuel chapter 5. If you have your Bibles, let's turn there together. 1 Samuel chapter 5, again, this is right after Judges. Of course, it's before 2 Samuel. By the way, in the Hebrew Bible, 1 and 2 Samuel is just one big book. Just one big book, probably written maybe by Ezra, maybe by Gad, maybe by Nathan the prophet, maybe by Samuel. At least certain portions of it were, perhaps. We get here to 1 Samuel chapter 5. That's where we're going to be. We're going to look at the 7 months where the ark of the Lord was there in the Philistine camp. Now, I know what you may be thinking. This sermon will not last 7 months, so don't give me that. I know it's going to last long. It's going to maybe last longer than 7 minutes, but certainly not 7 months. But it's a brief time when the Philistines had the ark of God in their camp. And check this out. Not only did they bring the ark into the camp, but they brought the ark into their place of worship. The Philistines had a sacred place of worship. And think about what that means. When they bring the ark in, now all of a sudden they have divided hearts.
that they were worshiping not only their own God or multiple gods, but now they're bringing in the ark of God as well to worship the Hebrew God, the one true God. And we're going to see how God reacts to people who have divided hearts. Divided hearts in this particular 1 Samuel chapter 5. Read with me here, beginning in verse 1 of chapter 5. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. That was their god, one of their gods. This was a statue, a wooden statue, an idol attributed to their god Dagon. Verse 3. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. But this time, the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold there of their temple. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. It's like they thought the threshold was cursed and it was causing their statue to break apart. Well, here's verse 6. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon, our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, well, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they answered, well, let the ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. And so they brought the ark of the God of Israel there. But after they brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against that city, causing a very great panic. And he, God, afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. And so they sent the ark of God to Ekron. That's nice, isn't it? To send it over to your neighbors. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, They have brought around to us the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent, therefore, and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and sent the ark away. That's what they were calling for. Send the ark away and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. Pray with me here. Father, thank you for this word. What does it mean when we see the ark and we see this big wooden statue and they're there in this place of worship for the Philistines, and we see the back and forth, and we see, Father, your hand heavy? What does that teach us, and how does that speak into our lives today? We could easily dismiss this and say, well, that was then. That was a different people, and they were worshiping different things, and that's not me. That's not me. So how is this relevant to me in 2021 or whenever someone may be watching this? That's an awesome question. Father, show us how this speaks so powerfully into our lives, even now. In Jesus' name, amen. And so we see here that the ark of God, once it was captured, that it was bouncing around all over the Philistine territory, kind of like a hot potato, that it didn't stay very long in any one area. And if you were with us a few weeks ago, we were introduced to the Philistines, and their name means a people by the sea. And they were about 30 miles west of Israel, all along the Mediterranean coast, from Gad up to Gaza, all the way up to Ashdod. That was their territory, a very broad territory for the Philistines. They had defeated Israel in battle back in chapter 4, and the ark was part of the spoil. And so we see here the ark being bounced all over that territory. And I think it tells us a little bit about their character, that when things weren't going well for one particular area, they just passed the problem on to their neighbor. It's like they didn't like what was happening, so they just passed it along. That's very nice, isn't it, to think about that? And so I had all kinds of funny thoughts. You know, you may have a neighbor that just rakes his leaves right over into your yard. Like they're a problem for him or her, so just pass that problem right along. Or maybe you have a neighbor that has a really big dog, and they don't want that dog to poop in their yard, so they just send that dog over into your yard, you know? Just pass that problem right along. That's very neighborly, isn't it? You have a neighbor that's like that. Just pass that problem right along. And so I had all these funny thoughts about neighbor to neighbor. Man, the ark is wreaking havoc with God working through the ark. And we saw this a couple of weeks ago. The ark was just a wooden box. So there was no power unto itself except God working through it like a vessel. The ark was a box. It was not God, but it was a representation. And when God worked through the ark, the box, it could be very powerful. And so God was working through that very heavily. And so the people of the Philistines were just passing it along. Just passing that problem right on down to their neighbor, and each one's crying out. By the time it arrives in Akron, man, they're all freaking out. They've heard the rumors. They know what's happening. They can't believe that it would just get passed on to them. It tells us a little bit about their character, but also this. It tells us something about their hearts. Because at this particular time, it would have been one thing to bring the ark in as a relic or as a trophy or as just something you would bring into camp to show off because of your victory. But they actually brought it into their place of worship and brought it next to Dagon, their idol Dagon. And it was as if to say, yes, Dagon is superior, but here's the opportunity to worship more than one God. They brought it into their holy place to be part of their worship. Suddenly their hearts, if not before, their hearts are divided. And that creates a problem as we begin to see here, hearts that are divided. And I believe if we ask the right questions, it's going to speak very personally into our lives when it comes to you and I having very often hearts that are divided. And so as we look back here at chapter 5, let's ask a couple of big questions of this text. And here is question number 1. Do you think that you can hide your idols from God? That sounds odd to ask that question. Do you think that you can hide your idols from God? And so when the Philistines captured the ark and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod, look at verse 2. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up on display beside Dagon. Now, this Dagon statue was an idol of all idols in the classic sense. The classical definition of an idol is a symbol or a representation of a god that you would use as an object of worship. And Dagon was this god of the Philistines, one of many gods, but he was a god of good weather for them, they would believe. He was a god of military victory. He was known in legend to be the father of Baal. Maybe you've heard of Baal from other Old Testament idol stories. Other gods that the people in the area of Canaan would worship, often Baal. That Dagon was seen as the father of Baal, and this huge wooden statue, legend would have it, was very, very tall, standing over 20 feet tall, that it was made out of wood. It was a carving of wood. The base and the lower portion was carved of a big, large fish, and the upper body would be the carving of a man. And so it was like this ancient merman or Aquaman there in the middle of their place of worship. And so literally they set it up, they set the ark by Dagon. And so right there is the ark representing God, and they place it right in the open next to their own idol named Dagon. Now think about that. The ark and this big wooden statue, one represents the God of all gods, the true God, and one represents their false God. It represents what they thought in terms of good weather and military victory. And so there, in the sense, is the presence of God being put together with their idol as if God wouldn't notice their idol, as if it's just one of many things. And we begin to see what happens when those things are put together. And interestingly, two things are happening when they bring Dagon and the ark together. The first thing is probably this, that Dagon is superior, that they were bringing the ark of God in. They had defeated the Israelites, and so they're thinking Dagon is superior, but here's an opportunity to worship Dagon, and if it works for you, you can worship the ark as well. And in missiology and in the missionary world, we would call that syncretism. That it's like worship is a big buffet, and you just go up with your plate, your worship plate, and you just put on that plate whatever you want. Just whatever you might like to have. If you want a little bit of Dagon to worship, that's fine. If you want a little bit of the ark of the God of the Hebrews, that's fine too. Just whatever is working for you, you can really add it all in. So maybe you have a relationship with God, but you have all of these other gods as well. And in some of my journeys to Brazil, that's exactly how it happens. We go into someone's house, and they have this shelf. And on that shelf, they have all of these different icons and idols and things. We tell them about Jesus. And very often, sometimes they're like, well, just give us a statue or a figurine of Jesus that we can put up on that shelf, and we can just have it all. It's like a buffet of worship. It's just all assimilated together. So maybe on Monday you worship God. On Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever, you worship whatever. Kind of sounds like us in our day. On Sunday, I'll worship God. On Monday through Saturday, maybe it's, if we're honest, something a little different. And so you have this meshing together. But I know what you're thinking. Well, I don't have an idol like that. If I say, how in the world do you think you can hide your idols from God? You're dismissing that because you don't think you have idols, and maybe you don't in terms of the classic sense. That maybe you don't have a big wooden statue, or the way we often think of idols is like a golden figurine or something like that. But maybe in our day, the idols are more subtle. That it's something that might even be a good thing, except the way you crave it, it captivates your desires, your heart. If we're honest, our hearts are often divided between things that captivate us. And very often we're loving that even more than God himself. And therein is the problem, is that when we're honest, we all struggle at times with hearts that are divided. And I'll just give you a very simple example. One of the things that I struggle with sometimes is food. A couple of months ago, I tried out that low-carb diet, that keto diet. And wouldn't you know it, that a few days into that is when I had these images, like these visions of the big, giant hamburger or this big pizza that's the supreme, that's all the way loaded with all those carbs and goodies, those kinds of cravings that just captivate and begin to motivate. And oftentimes it can be something silly like that. But we have very subtle things that get a hold of us, whether it's a craving or even an addiction, something that just captivates our hearts to the point, if we're not careful, that the love of that begins to be elevated above God himself. We do that to jobs, careers, reputations, the love of self. Maybe it's another person. You're craving a relationship with another person to the point that you're seeking that ahead of God. Maybe you're a minister that you're so craving for your church to grow that you're worshiping the mission ahead of God himself. And you can see how hearts become divided if we're not careful. These things that we wouldn't think of as idols become that idol, as if we think we could hide those things from God. So in your personal time or your quiet time this week, be honest with God. Listen, when God gets a hold of my heart, when he reveals to me those idols in my life, it's because God knows my heart better than anyone. And the same is true for you. But you've got to be willing to be honest. Here are the Philistines trying to bring God alongside these other idols. And God always knows when we're loving something or someone ahead or greater than God himself. He knows. So be honest with God this week. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you can hide those things from God. But here's question number two. Question number two. Do you think that your idols are greater than God? Do you think that your idols are greater than God? You may not say that you believe it, but maybe you live differently than you believe. Look at what we see in the text. So when the Philistines bring the ark and set it up beside Dagon, quite possibly, most of the commentators would write that Dagon stood towering over the ark. I mean, the ark was probably only on display maybe 5, 6, 7 just counter height above the floor. And so here's Dagon towering over as superior to the ark of the God of Israel. Look at verse 3. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. And so if you're wondering what happened to Dagon on that first night, I promise you this, it wasn't someone from Israel sneaking across the border, going into that temple to knock Dagon over. It was God intervening. It was God putting Dagon in his proper place. Literally, you have here Dagon laying face downward as if to be worshiping at the feet of the ark. That was the message, that God was intervening to put Dagon in his place. But we see the people didn't get the message, did they? They put Dagon back, and look at verse 4. When they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. And this time, the head and the hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. Now, at this point, maybe you're feeling a little bit bad for Dagon. God was having fun with this idol at the expense of the people. But this is really the message. If we stubbornly hang on to those idols in our lives, God will intervene to put them in their place. God will show himself stronger. Here with just this box, this ark, that would not in stature physically compare to the statue of Dagon, God put that idol in its place. And you would ask the question, well, why would God do that? Because God is a jealous God. Throughout the scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, we read over and over that God is a jealous God. Here's an example. Exodus 34, verse 13 and 14. God says, this is the very word of God spoken through Moses. You shall tear down those false altars and break the pillars and cut down the Asherah poles, that these things of false worship. God says, remove them, in essence, for you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. And that word jealousy, it's not like human emotional jealousy. When God says that he's jealous, this is not soap opera jealousy, okay? Where there's meanness and backbiting and anger and all that kind of stuff thrown in. This isn't soap opera jealousy. What this is God telling you this, that nothing is greater than him. He created all things. In the beginning was God. Nothing was before him. He created all things. He's greater than all things. And when God says that he's a jealous God, here is the understanding. He wants you to know him that way and worship him that way. That he would be your first love. That he would be greater than all things in your life. That God would have top priority. And because he deserves that, he is worthy of that, even when we don't treat him that way, we're guilty of worshiping the wrong things. Here's the thing. We were made to worship because God created us to know him, to love him, and to worship him. But we're all bent towards worshiping the wrong things. And so anytime we elevate something to the place of first love in our lives, or I would even say even equal to God, the truth is nothing is equal to God. And when you stubbornly hang on to that, eventually God will show himself stronger. He will intervene to put that idol into its place. Maybe if you think about it, in your personal time or your quiet time or your group time this week, you can think back to a time when God has done that very thing in your life. I'll tell you this on myself, that after I finished a clerkship, it was like a platform into what I thought was a dream job. I mean, think about this, big law firm. They had offices all over the United States, big salaries, of course, big expectations as well. But I had this silk stocking job that paid me way too much money. I'll be honest, it was more than I was worth at the time based on my experience. That it had all the bells and whistles. It's what I thought was the goal of all goals, getting that dream job, or at least I thought that it was, until it absolutely consumed me. It was all that I thought about. It was everything that I did, everything that I thought about. I poured everything into that. Even my own wife said, Jason, this is getting out of control. And as I look back on it, very literally, nothing was going right. 2 years into that job, nothing. I mean, it was like God, literally, the more I held on to that job to keep up with the pace, to try to make it work, it's like I see God literally ripping it out of my hands. Just anything that could go wrong went wrong. And you might could easily say, well, God was calling me somewhere else. He was. God had different plans. That wasn't the right job for me, absolutely. But in my heart, the chasing of it and the hanging on to it, eventually God showed himself stronger. And no matter what I could do in my own strength, God was taking that idol away from me. It's terribly humbling, but it's also amazing when God shows himself stronger and helps you to be able to put him first. God is worthy of that, and God will show himself stronger. And even though that's difficult, I pray that he does that for you as he continues to do that for me. In your personal time or group time, think about what would it take for you to identify those idols and lay them at his feet. There's some things you need to put down and just stop. And you can't, it controls you. And God he will rip that away from you. He will take that away. But there's other things you just need to adjust in terms of your love. And there's repentance and there's refocusing that needs to happen. God will help you prioritize the things you need to put down, the things you need to slow down when it comes to putting him first. Don't make the mistake of thinking or even living like your idols are greater than God. But here's our final question today. This is question number 3. Do you really know how much God loves you? Do you really know the love that God has for you? And you say, well, I don't see love in this particular text. Well, look what happens here as God turns his attention from the idol to the people. Look at verse 6. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And literally this happened wherever the ark went. God showed himself strong, not just to the idol, but to the people. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't seem like love to you. But let me help you understand it this way. These people had no idea who God was. But going back to the days of Noah, these people came from the line of Noah through his son Ham. And in the beginning, they knew God. Their great ancestors would have known God. And here's a pastoral warning for all of us in ministry or those of us who care about the mission of God. After several generations, here we have people from Noah who don't even know who God is. I mean, they have no clue. They have no relationship with him. They are lost. They are distant. They are disconnected. So only by the ark being brought there and the power of God working in their lives was there any hope that they would know and actually turn to the living God. Look what we read in verse 7. When the men of Ashdod saw how things were, and God wasn't just killing them in the beginning, he was afflicting them and terrifying them, But we don't see death just yet, not until even more stubbornness sets in. But look at verse 7. The men say, well, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for not just the hand of the ark, but God's hand is hard against us and against Dagon, our God. And so that's when they began shipping the ark all over the Philistine territory, passing the buck. And everywhere it went was the same thing, the hand of God getting the attention of the people. And here's the point. I know this doesn't sound loving, but maybe the most loving thing God could do for you is whatever it takes to get a hold of your life. For you to know that He's real, for you to know that He wants a relationship with you, as gentle as it needs to be, but honestly as direct as it needs to be, ultimately with eternity, your eternity on the line. A little bit of suffering, or maybe even a lot, in this life is nothing compared to an eternity where you have no relationship with God. The most loving thing that God could ever do in your life is whatever it takes to get your attention so that you have the hope of turning to Him to really experience His love. If only the Philistines could have seen that the hand of God against them was not just punishing them for stealing the ark. It was actually calling them out in their idolatry. It was calling them to know the one true God. If only they could have seen that and turned back. Their great, 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 many multitude generational ancestors would have known God. But somewhere along the line, they lost the way. They fell away, not even knowing who God is. But here with the ark in their camp, there was hope. If only they had turned and seen the hand of God. But instead, what we see is them sending the ark. What we would read, if you have time in your personal time this week, the rest of chapter 5 into chapter 6, 7 months is all it took. And what we see them doing, instead of turning to God, is they load up the ark with a bunch of tribute and treasure. They send the ark away as fast as they can, as if to get rid of God, to get Him as far away from their lives as possible. And at least in this section of chapters 5 and 6 of 1 Samuel, the hope of them turning to God was lost. They missed the opportunity. They missed the point. The hand of God against them was not just punishing them, but it was the hope that they would know that God is the one true God. They would put away the Dagons, and they would turn to Him. And so here's where we are in this moment. I don't know spiritually how things are going for you. Maybe you would say you have never experienced the love of God. But maybe it's this, that in our sin, God teaches us that we're hostile to Him, that we're enemies, kind of like the Philistines here. And His hand will be heavy at times against your life. That you've yet to say, I've really experienced the true love of God. But this is the difference. That Jesus came to pursue you from heaven to earth, to take away those things that separate you, to break down the barriers and the hostility so that you can have peace with God because He's laid His life down, Jesus did, in your place, so that the judgment of God does not have to be heavy against you. In fact, Jesus took it upon Himself so that you no longer have to bear it. The consequence of rebellion has been satisfied if you would turn to Him. So maybe you've not experienced the true love of God because you're still hostile to Him in your sin, or something like this, in your rebellion, and mine too. We're guilty of chasing after the wrong things. You're missing out on the love of God because you're so busy missing it, chasing after so many other things. Let me close with this. There's this legend. It's one of my favorite legends. I was reading about that a few weeks ago. These two cargo ships leaving out of Memphis, back when steamships still ran on coal, these cargo ships, 2 of them, there was a brother on each ship as the captain, leaving out together to make their way to New Orleans, and they were loaded down with supplies to help the people after a hurricane. And so as they're going down the Mississippi River, one brother's looking at the other across the river, and they begin to kind of have fun with one another. And then they begin to have this idea to race one another. And so, man, they're challenging each other. And suddenly, the point of their journey is not just to get the supplies to New Orleans. The point was one brother to outdo the other. It became a rivalry. It became a race. But here was the problem. Those ships running on the coal had just enough coal, because coal's heavy, just enough coal to get them to New Orleans under normal operating conditions. Not when they're stoking the fire to win a race. And so when the ships began to run out of coal, what do? Well, because they were now racing with pride on the line, they were chasing after the wrong things. They actually began throwing in that precious cargo into the ship's bay there, into the ovens to propel the ship forward. And so they actually made the mistake of burning up all of their cargo in the hope of winning the race. And you know what happened? Well, one ship won. How about that? Actually won the race, but they both lost the point. By the time they arrived and they floated in on fumes into New Orleans, they had burned up all of their cargo, and the whole point of the mission of their journey, the whole purpose, was lost. It was gone. It was ruined. And I think about that with you and I in life. It gets so busy and distracting and confusing that we begin chasing after the wrong things. And here's what happens. We miss the point. We miss God. We miss His love. We miss the thing that more than anything else, God has created us, and we have life to know Him, to love Him, to experience His love. And so many of us, man, we miss it. And hearts that are divided, man, you're going to miss it. The only hope is that God intervenes to say, look, your heart is not where it needs to be. You're divided. You're chasing after all of these other things. And next week, we're going to see the ark back with Israel and God continuing to work on their hearts with His presence there back in Israel. But before we get to that point, let God do this work in your life right now as we pray together. Let's just simply pray. Father, help us. Help us. Now, we don't have big wooden statues probably like that. We may have big wooden houses or fancy cars or the hope or the dream of those things. And here's where it gets tricky is it's not that material things are bad. It's not that food is bad or relationships. Not all of these things are bad, but and even money. The scriptures say that it's not money, or it's not that money's wrong, but it's the love of it. It's the heart. When our hearts are divided and we're chasing after two masters, or even more than two sometimes. And so, Father, help us to see those idols in our lives. Man, it might be that mobile device, that cell phone that never leaves your hand. It's actually becoming an idol. I mean, I know for some people it's the worst addiction of all. It can be so subtle, but that God would help you to see. And not only that, but to help you to surrender. And for some of us, it means fasting, taking breaks from things, putting them in their place so that they don't have a hook into us, that we're seeking God and keeping Him first in our lives. God will show you how to wrestle and struggle with those things. He'll show you what it means to surrender, to lay those things at His feet. And finally, not just to see and surrender, but to seek Him as your first love. To really seek Him and to experience His love. What if you did that? What if this was that moment for you? A defining moment of, maybe a moment of salvation, a moment of repentance, just to lay those things down that you've been chasing after. And it can mean major change for your life. It can be more subtle. God will help you wrestling through what that means for you. But to seek Him first, let everything else fall into place. Not just as your Savior, but as Lord. That's a big difference for many of us. Is we want to bring Jesus in as a nice, warm, loving Savior, and He is. But He wants to be first. He deserves that as God, as the one true God. Father, show yourself strong this week. Intervene into our lives. Captivate us with your amazing love. If you didn't love us, you wouldn't do those things, but you do. So make it so in Jesus' name. Amen. We're going to sing that song. He is jealous for you. He really is. And I hope that you will lean into what God has for you as we sing and we close this time of worship. God bless you this week. Thank you for letting me speak into your life, God's word today. If you have any questions, we will connect with you after we're finished. But right here, this is you and God time. You and God time as we sing.
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of His wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. And oh, how He loves us so. Oh, how He loves us, how He loves us.
God bless you. Know that the Lord does love you. Yes, He does love us. And I hope that you'll sing that truth. Let it get deep in your spirit. I hope you'll remind yourself of that truth. And then be involved in the mission of God to let others know about that truth also. That yes, He truly loves us. Well, God bless you. We hope you have a wonderful week. Just reveling in the Lord's love. Bye now.